Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
I already love same-day delivery with Shipt, but it's so much better since I signed up for Target's Circle 360. Why? Because I no longer pay price markups from the majority of stores through Shipt. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. That means no markups on groceries, pet food, even home goods and makeup. So to recap, I have more time to catch up on life while someone shops for me, and I spend less. It's a win-win. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
It's not a hostile work environment, Gavin, because you do so very little work here. Yes.
The following podcast contains...
You cannot say filth, flying filth in front of people.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When your idea of flirting is asking a woman if she put a pube on your Coke can, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 455.
We have clearance, Clarence.
And it's part 3 of Summer Series 2024, and we're talking about the horniest justice on the Supreme Court. Everyone's favorite fascist, Horny Clarence Thomas. Stay tuned. What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Rent-A-Justice. When you can't afford to buy, you can always rent. The price of buying a vote on the Supreme Court just keeps going up, and it's becoming harder and harder to keep one of your own. That's where Rent-A-Justice comes in. Think of it like a timeshare for your court case. Not every corporation, right-wing think tank, and gun manufacturer can shell out millions of dollars for a brand new RV every time they need to buy a vote. So Rent-A-Justice, you can rent to own your own Supreme Court justice. You pay less each month, and over time, you will have your very own Supreme Court justice. Why should the multi-billionaires be the only one with Supreme Court justice when just a regular billionaire can't? With Rent-A-Justice, now you can. Offer only applies to right-wing justices.
Two remarkably composed witnesses giving diametrically opposed versions of their relationship 10 years ago. Professor Hill said she was embarrassed and humiliated by sexually explicit remarks made by her boss, Clarence Thomas. Why did she not come forward before? Because she said, "I did not want to let the behavior control my choices." Judge Thomas denied saying anything out of line. He denounced the whole process and said, "No job is worth what I've been through." We begin a long report with ABC's Jim Wooten.
Through hallways reverberating with the cheers and chants of his supporters, Judge Thomas headed into the hearing to present himself to the committee and the country as a victim who would be a victim no more.
I have never in all my life felt such hurt, such pain, such agony.
I have not always been the woke gentleman that I am today. In my younger days, I could sadly be characterized correctly as,
he's a sexist pig.
I mean, it wasn't how I was raised. My mother's no feminist, but she would have slapped me into the Stone Age if she'd ever heard me comment something like this to a woman.
Look at those tits on her. They're huge.
So it wasn't like I didn't know better. But, you see, young men, well, we sometimes do things because we want to be liked. We want to fit in. And back in the late 80s and early 90s...
Your casual misogyny, for one.
...was not only normalized, it was basically required in a world in which I lived. There weren't all that many women in the ranks, and frankly, the few that were there were more than the old guard wanted there. So they instructed us young lads on the fine art of toxic masculinity and blatant sexism.
Thank you for your service.
This never made a lot of sense to me because personally, I liked women around. I wanted as many around me as possible. This was for a pretty simple reason. Well, maybe, just maybe, one of them would have sex with me.
Not gonna happen. No, not gonna happen.
So slowly, over time, in baby steps, it dawned on me that my odds of one of them maybe having sex with me would increase dramatically if I weren't a
total fucking asshole.
As I began practicing this radical new idea of treating women like human beings rather than the dirty gym shots I used as a jizz receptacle.
You're such a gentleman.
I began to discover that I liked women as, actual human beings. And in fact, I vastly preferred their company to the company of other dudes.
Gay, totally gay.
I was evolving. When I found myself at a Lilith fair watching the Indigo Girls perform live as basically the only man in the crowd, I realized that...
I want to be a woman.
What? No, would I be happier if I were a woman? Probably, but, I'm committed to this whole cisgender hetero dude thing now, so I'm going to stick with it. Now, what I realized on that awesome afternoon that I wasn't the piggy little shit that I was when I was 18. And while I wasn't perfect, I wasn't just treating women like human beings as a scam to get laid. I was doing it because I thought it was the right thing to do.
You are gay.
Still get more pussy than you, Gavin. It wasn't like some huge revelation. It was because I was raised to be that way, and I just acted like a shit to impress other men who I loathed. And when I stopped doing it, I felt good about myself, and women actually liked me. Some of them even had sex with me. I will tell you, however, that even at my most misogynist, I never went up to a woman and asked her if she put a pubic hair on my Coke can, because honestly...
Who does that?
Well, let me introduce you to this week's topic.
Oh shit, he's here.
Clarence Thomas. Now, quick production meeting here at mid-show. This is part 3 of the summer series, and we are dead in the middle of a 5-episode arc about sex scandals of the 80s and 90s, and frankly, our 2-part conclusion is going to be huge. Would it be okay with you, the listener, if I skipped the usual digression, say, into the history of the U.S. Supreme Court and got right to the relevant content?
Oh my God, yes, please.
Okay, then. Consider this a summer short in the middle of our summer series.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Clarence Thomas, no middle name, he was too poor for middle names, was born in Pinpoint, Georgia, just south of Savannah in 1948. Pinpoint is a Gullah community founded by freed slaves after the Civil War. The Gullah are African Americans who keep and maintain their roots to their West African heritage and speak a Creole dialect called Gullah or Geechee, mixing their African language with English, and that was what Clarence grew up speaking.
Why are you telling us this?
Because it provides insight and context into a complex personality that is Clarence Thomas. Clarence was the second of 3 children to a farm worker, M.C. Thomas, and Leola Williams. In 1951, M.C. Thomas divorced his wife and left her the children and saw his own kids only one more time during his life. Leola worked as a maid and raised her kids in crippling poverty until she literally begged her father, Myers Anderson, to take her boys and raise them, which he did.
Oh, that is sweet.
Well, not exactly. He did refuse several times until Myers' wife threatened to throw him out of the house if he didn't take the boys in. Wikipedia has this to say about Myers Anderson, quote, Thomas and his brother went to live with Anderson, his maternal grandfather, in 1955 and experienced amenities such as indoor plumbing and regular meals for the first time. Despite having little formal education, Anderson built a successful business delivering coal, oil, and ice. When racial unrest led to widespread protests and marches in Savannah from 1960 to 1963, Anderson used his wealth to bail out demonstrators and took his grandchildren to meetings promoted by the NAACP. Thomas has described his grandfather as the person who has influenced his life the most, unquote.
He was a good man, a good father.
Well, I'll let you decide because this is what Clarence Thomas wrote in his autobiography as excerpted in the New Yorker, quote, on the day the boys moved into the house, Anderson told them the damn vacation is over, and the boys had plenty to eat and their own beds, neither of which they had with their mother. But the man they called Daddy imposed a life of grim discipline. Chores and schoolwork had priority over everything else in the Anderson household, and Myers never wanted to hear any excuses. Old man Kant is dead. I helped bury him, he would tell his grandsons. Thomas notes he never praised us, just as he never hugged us. Beatings with a belt or switch were frequent. Eventually, Thomas writes, Anderson bought a new truck for his business, but he took out the heater because the warmth, he said, would make us lazy, unquote.
Okay, this man is clearly a monster.
I don't know. Compared to the work his grandson's done, he's basically fucking Santa Claus. But all of this tough love did create an intelligent, even gifted, highly motivated young man in Clarence Thomas. Young Clarence attended Catholic schools and decided he would become a priest. Oh, if only he had been a priest. I mean, yeah, that would be so great for the altar boys, but it would have been better for the rest of us. He did attend seminary right up until the time MLK was assassinated, and the racism he witnessed at said seminary led him to leave that path and transfer to the College of the Holy Cross. At Holy Cross, Thomas majored in English Lit and minored in black radicalism.
Would you run that by me again, please?
Oh yeah, young Clarence Thomas in the 60s had a whole Malcolm X poster on the wall, protested Vietnam, and participated in the Harvard Square riots in 1970.
Are we talking about the same person?
I'm getting there as fast as I can. He graduated 9th in his class from Holy Cross, attended Yale Law School at the same time as Hillary Clinton.
Okay, now I know you've lost it.
He graduated in 74, went into private corporate law in Atlanta. According to Thomas, all the law firms considered him an affirmative action Yaley and wouldn't hire him. And this is where Clarence Thomas began to take a hard right turn. But this is not a biography podcast about Clarence Thomas, but about the shitty things he did to women. So I'm going to...
Yada, yada, yada.
A whole bunch of shit, and suffice to say that Clarence Thomas was no longer a left-wing radical when in 1981, President... God... Reagan...
He said it!
Appointed him Assistant Secretary of Education in the Office of Civil Rights.
Because he was a black man.
Oh, no, Podfritz. Well, okay, yes, because he was, yes, a black man. But far more importantly, Clarence Thomas was a black man who was against affirmative action. A short time later, Thomas was promoted in a fit of deep Reaganomic irony to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission because, again, Thomas hated the EEOC. And that is where Clarence's story begins to become relevant to our summer series. Because you see, it was around this time that Clarence divorced his first wife and began living the DC bachelor lifestyle. Now, pod friends, I have lived the DC bachelor lifestyle, and I have to say...
Horny. Yeah. Crazy horny.
If you are remotely close to power in this city, you can get laid. It ain't even hard. But there was one small problem for Clarence. The pool of eligible women in the early 1980s did not meet his, let's just say, criteria. How can I put this? If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., it has always been,
Chocolate City.
And there are two DCs, one of which is very black, and the other is, of course...
Which was very white.
And the two, particularly in the 80s, did not the twain meet. So, you see, the women that Horny Clarence could most readily date were not the women that Horny Clarence, from now on out, I'm calling him Horny Clarence, not the women that Horny Clarence wanted to date. Because Horny Clarence was asking one very simple question.
Hey, where are the white women at?
Because he had not yet risen high enough in the conservative establishment to successfully be able to date white women, what was a red-blooded man like young Horny Clarence to do?
What about porn?
Lillian McEwen, a Department of Justice lawyer who dated Thomas in the mid-1980s, and yes, she is black. That is relevant, but not important to what she said about Horny Clarence, as is quoted in a New York Times article, quote, but Miss McEwen said she knew a different Clarence Thomas, one whom she recognized in the 1991 testimony of Miss Hill, who claimed that he had repeatedly made inappropriate sexual comments to her work, including description of pornographic films. Miss McEwen said pornography for Justice Thomas was just a part of his personality structure. She said he kept a stack of pornographic magazines, frequented a store on DuPont Circle that catered to his needs, and allowed his interest in pornography to bleed into his professional relationships. It starts inside, she said, tapping her head for a minute during a 30-minute interview. And then your behavior just flows from what is that is important to you, from what it is that is important to you. That's what happened with him, certainly. Unquote. Don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with legal porn. Cranking one out to a MILF in stiletto heels, spread eagle on a couch with her big boobies jiggling as she kickstarts a 1200cc dick rocket and howls like a coyote and eat.
Dave.
Where was I? Oh yeah, right. But when your political position is shitting on people who enjoy porn because they are moral and godless, then maybe you shouldn't be down on DuPont Circle renting.
And suddenly, you've just rented your millionth porno tape. Get a picture of him with it. Anal entry volume 500. He made it through every one of them.
It just makes you seem a bit hypocritical is all. Not that this has ever bothered Horny Clarence Thomas, as soon we shall see. It is while Horny Clarence is at the Department of Education that he hires an assistant, a young attorney by the name of Anita Hill. Anita is a Yale Law School alumni and was working at a D.C. law firm when Horny Clarence hired her as his assistant. When he moved to EEOC, Anita went with him to become his assistant there as well. Now, on the surface, Horny Clarence Thomas hiring an accomplished young black female lawyer as assistant seems like an act of a mentor. But you see, the thing is, Horny Clarence did this because he
wants to fuck her?
Yeah, almost as soon as she was hired, Horny Clarence started coming on to her, asking her out on dates, not taking no for an answer. And this went on until Horny Clarence either got bored with it or more likely found someone else to harass. Either way, things did improve enough that when he went to the EEOC, Hill went as well because, again, these are powerful positions and Anita Hill was an ambitious person. And almost as soon as they were settled at EEOC, the harassment resumed, which goes to support my theory that old Horny Clarence had found someone else at DOE to harass, though no one has ever come forward to say so. Let's have Anita Hill tell us in her own words what working for Horny Clarence Thomas was like from her statement to the Senate Confirmation Committee for Thomas's Supreme Court nomination in 1991. Quote, my working relationship with Judge became even more strained when Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex. On these occasions, he would call me into his office for reports on education issues and projects, or he might suggest that because of the time pressures of his schedule, we go to lunch at a government cafeteria. After a brief discussion of work, he would turn the conversation to a discussion of sexual matters. His conversations were very vivid. He spoke about the acts he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women have sex with animals and films showing group sex or rape scenes. He talked about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large penises or large breasts involved in various sex acts. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. And for the first month of the EEOC, where I continued to be an assistant to Judge Thomas, there were no sexual conversations or overtures. However, during the fall and winter of 1982, these began again. The comments were random and ranged from pressing me about why I didn't go out with him to remarks about my personal appearance. I remember his saying that one day I would have to tell him the real reason that I wouldn't go out with him. He began to show displeasure in his tone and voice and his demeanor and continued to press for an explanation. He commented on what I was wearing in terms of whether or not it made me more or less sexually attractive. The incidents occurred in his inner office at the EEOC. Quick reminder, pod friends, this was at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, a commission that ostensibly was made to address this exact kind of fucking behavior. Going back to Anita's testimony. One of the oddest episodes I remembered was an occasion in which Thomas was drinking a Coke in his office. He got up from the table at which we were working, went over his desk to get the Coke, looked at the can, and asked, "Who has pubic hair on my Coke?" On other occasions, he referred to the size of his own penis as being larger than normal, and he also spoke on some occasions as to the pleasures he had given women with oral sex. At this point, in late 1982, I began to feel severe stress on the job. I began to be concerned that Clarence Thomas might take out his anger on me by degrading me or not giving me important assignments, and I also thought he might find an excuse for dismissing me, unquote.
Seems nice.
Hill left public service and took up teaching, and it wasn't until 1991 when George H.W. Bush nominated Clarence Thomas to fill the recently vacated seat on the Supreme Court of Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice. That Anita Hill thought about Horny Clarence again, and what she thought is that maybe the Senate should know that Horny Clarence Thomas was a misogynist fucker and a serial sexual harasser. And that is how she came to testify at the committee with none other than your friend and mine, at the time, Senator Joe Biden presiding over the hearings. The immediate and vociferous reaction to her testimony was that this kind of behavior was...
It's outrageous, egregious, preposterous.
Just not in the way that you, the modern listener to such an enlightened podcast as this one, might think. The outrage was not that Horny Clarence Thomas was a scumbag piece of shit who used his position and power to sexually harass a young woman. The outrage was more along the lines of...
How dare she?
Besmirched the reputation of this honorable man. A man who had already been confirmed to the appellate court without a hint of scandal. Who was this woman to spread such lies about a good man, a judge, a paragon of the black community?
I mean, who the hell does she think she is?
Republican Senator Orrin Hatch implied that Hill was working in tandem with slick lawyers and interest groups bent on destroying Thomas's chances to join the court. There were 4 other women who had agreed to testify in support of Anita Hill's claim, but this might shock you, pod friends. They were never called.
No, I'm not shocked.
You see, in the interest of bipartisanship, good old Senator Joe Biden cut a deal with Republicans on the committee, as the LA Times reports in 1991. Quote, Sunday evening, as a second woman was prepared to testify that Judge Clarence Thomas also made unpleasant sexual remarks to her, Senate Republicans and Democrats reached a private agreement that kept the woman off national television. The compromise meant that Angela Wright, who had been fired by Thomas at the EEOC, did not provide the testimony that Oklahoma law professor Anita Hill supporter had deemed crucial to buttressing her credibility. Instead, the transcript of his Senate staff interview of Wright was released to reporters late that night and received little attention, unquote. Now, as you can imagine, Horny Clarence, he got indignant. In fact, he got mad.
Start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today that suggested in any way that I had conversations of a sexual nature or about pornographic material with Anita Hill, that I ever attempted to date her, that I ever had any personal sexual interest in her, or that I in any way ever harassed her. A second, and I think more important point, I think that this today is a travesty. I think that it is disgusting. I think that this hearing should never occur in America. This is a case in which this sleaze, this dirt, was searched for by staffers of members of this committee, was then leaked to the media, and this committee and this body validated it and displayed it prime time over our entire nation. How would any member on this committee, any person in this room, or any person in this country would like sleaze said about him or her in this fashion?
Oh, I'm proud of that little sound design. Flanked by his new wife, Jenny. Oh, y'all know Jenny, right? She was part of that whole little plot to overthrow the goddamn fucking government of the United States, but this was way before that. Flanked by her, Horny Clarence got all huffy at being called out on his shit. And pod friends, he was not alone in his huffiness. The Republican spin machine went to maximum work to the point the entire structural integrity of their argument was called into question.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. If I push it any harder, the whole thing will blow.
They called Hill a liar. They questioned her sanity. They accused her of plagiarizing the pube story from The Exorcist. That's the thing. I have seen The Exorcist a shitload of times. I don't remember a pube story in The Exorcist. Maybe it was in the book. A right-wing magazine rushed to press a hit book full of lies and disinformation that characterized Hill as a woman sexually obsessed with Horny Clarence Thomas and called her nutty and a little bit slutty, which I have to say, that was my type of woman in the 90s. The book's author retracted and apologized to Hill for the book, though he did not return the money he was paid to write it. Hill even took a polygraph, which she passed, in as much as one can pass a polygraph, though it should be noted that Horny Clarence did not take one. And as we all know, Horny Clarence was confirmed to the Supreme Court, and we have to live with that for this very fucking day, as he will soon be the longest-serving justice on the Supreme Court. The confirmation vote was close, 52-48 in Thomas's favor, the closest vote since 1881, and a number that would be surpassed by a fellow justice, beer lover, and misogynist and rapist,
allegedly,
Brett Kavanaugh. Peas in a pod, those fucking two. Hill's testimony has been validated by numerous women coming forward, and a pretty good case could be made that Horny Clarence committed perjury in his testimony, but hey, we're GOP men of action. Lies definitely become us. Hill has stood up in the face of decades of backlash and has no regrets about coming forward, though she still hasn't forgiven nor forgotten what old Joe Biden did in the name of bipartisanship. And Horny Clarence has changed too. He's no longer horny for porn or pussy. Now he's just mostly horny for...
He's all about money.
And motorhomes and trips to Russia on private yachts. And I guess on those private yachts, the cokes are pube-free. Unless, of course, you like pubes on your coke, in which case I'm sure they can do that for you. Anita Hill testimony did have a silver lining because women got pissed. Because every one of them had at least one fucking boss like Horny Clarence. Anita Hill could be fairly credited with launching the third wave feminism in the United States because women were simply sick and fucking tired of this shit. Rebecca Walker wrote in Ms. Magazine back in 1992, quote, "The backlash against U.S. women is real. As the misconception of equality between the sexes becomes more ubiquitous, so does the attempt to restrict the boundaries of women's personal and political power. Thomas's confirmation, the ultimate rally of support for male paradigm of harassment, sends a clear message to women. Shut up. Even if you speak, we will not listen. I will not be silenced. I acknowledge the fact that we have lived under siege. I intend to fight back. I have uncovered and unleashed more repressed anger than I thought possible. For the umpteenth time in my 22 years, I have been radicalized, politicalized, shaken awake. I've come to voice again, and this time my voice is not conciliatory," unquote. Within a year, a bill that gave harassment victims the right to seek federal damage awards, back pay, and reinstatement was passed by Congress, and the EEOC, no longer ran by Horny Clarence Thomas, since he was now silent Clarence on the fucking Supreme Court, saw sexual harassment reports spike 50%. The 1992 elections sent more women to Congress and the Senate than any other time in history and came to be termed the year of the woman. It took time, much longer than it should have, but Horny Clarence's harassment of Anita Hill fundamentally reshaped American culture regarding appropriate behavior between men and women in the workplace. The days of a boss chasing the secretary around the desk were over, much to the chagrin of young men, young and old, as the power dynamic of the workplace shifted. Anita Hill has had a long and successful career as an educator and women's advocate, and despite the fact that Horny Clarence got confirmed, he was for decades an almost powerless outlier on the court. I guess they worked out okay.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
But that was until... he came along, shifted the balance at the Supreme Court, and unleashed Horny Clarence and Greedy Clarence on us all, and set back the cause of women back 50 years. And all of this was possible because old Joe Biden decided that amicable bipartisanship in the Senate was way more important than the voice of someone who, after all, was only a woman. That is it for the show this week and for part 3 of Summer Series 2024. I called it audible on this one. The original plan was to do congressional scandals, which are juicier, but perhaps not as pertinent to the world in which we live in today. So you got Horny Clarence. Now, next week, we go into the 2-part series finale with the horniest of the horny. The man who redefined what it means to come on in and have a cigar. And you will need to tune in next week to find out exactly whom I am speaking of. Till then, rate, review, donate at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast, because the subscriptions to Jugs Magazine just don't pay for themselves. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, he will deny my expense claim for our subscription to Jugs Magazine. And so for me, Dave, when I start making love, I don't just make love, I be stroking Bledsoe. Producer,
no, I refuse. I said not gonna have. No, fine. Stroke it to the east, stroke it to the west. I stroke it to the woman that I love the best.
Gavin, and all the fictional Supreme Court folks on this show, we want to say, Clarence Thomas, oh shit. And we'll see you all next week.
I don't stop until I know she's sassified. And I can always tell when she gets sassified. Because when she gets sassified, she started calling my name. She said, Clarence Carter, Clarence Carter, Clarence Carter, Clarence Carter. Ooh, shit, Clarence Carter. The other night, I was stroking my woman.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Bill Clinton's Gentlemen's Club.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.